Hey y'all, welcome to Soccer for Us. I'm Bart Keeler. First off, I have to thank you so much for joining me on the very first episode of Soccer for Us. This is a new podcast in the Soccer Down Here network. And here we'll be following the U.S. men's and women's national team, as well as general U.S. soccer news. I'm really thankful to Jason Longshore, John Nelson, and the SCH family for allowing me to contribute to their soccer coverage in this way. Now, as typical with the SDH umbrella, I will take probably a little bit more of an Atlanta/the South perspective here. Yes, we're covering U.S. soccer, and I look at it from a holistic perspective, but understand that I'm a Georgia boy, born and bred. So a lot of my takes are based on what I've experienced here, playing in college in North Carolina, and my other experiences from, traveling with American Outlaws and talking with them about U.S. soccer in general. Anyway, I hope you enjoy what I have to say here on this little podcast. I know I am looking forward to this journey, and I really hope that you continue to contribute to this podcast as you normally would Soccer Down Here. So, this is Soccer for Us. I would very much appreciate if you would subscribe. If you're listening right now, you're probably already listening on your favorite podcatcher, so go ahead and make sure you subscribe to Soccer Down Here. That will get you the daily Soccer Down Here show, as well as the European-focused soccer over there, as well as the run-up, which is the pregame show for Atlanta United matches. Again, this is Soccer for Us. I'm really excited you could be here with me, and let's get talking about what's going on in U.S. soccer. So before we start about the U.S. men's national team against Trinidad, I want to hit a couple of U.S. soccer headlines that are pretty important right now. Today, this is Friday, January 29, U.S. Soccer dropped their book of reports, which is kind of just like an overall general review of what they're going to be talking about at the annual general meeting and everything. Two pieces of news that came out of this. First, USSF reported a very bleak financial picture from 2020 and into 2021. Their reserves dropped $107 million total. And last year, they had a budget deficit of $40.6 million. Now, a lot of that is due to the reduced commercial and game day revenues. Obviously, the coronavirus pandemic stymied much of the growth that U.S. soccer had been experiencing over the past decade, and the lack of games and games that fans could attend definitely hurt that. But on a positive note, I think it's a positive. On a positive note, there was a change regarding the U.S. Open Cup. Instead of the rule that teams could have no more than 5 international players on their roster, U.S. Open Cup will now allow any player who is on the team's league-approved roster. So that means for MLS and USL teams and other, professional teams who might have international players on their roster, they can play in this competition without limitation. Now, the slight con to this move is that this may lead to fewer opportunities for younger players to fill in where those big-name internationals might have been given a break because, you can only have a certain number of internationals on the roster anyway. However, I think that overall this is a positive move for U.S. soccer and the U.S. Open Cup, allowing a much higher level of competition for this wonderful tournament that we unfortunately didn't get to experience in 2020. Anyway, so that's some news coming out of USSF. The other big piece of news to mention is that in the She Believes Cup, Japan has pulled out due to coronavirus concerns, and Argentina will replace them. Now, this may be a big downgrade in competition, but the first match day on February 18 is going to be lit. On February 18, Argentina will play Brazil to open the tournament, and then after that, USA and Canada will play. I expect blood on that pitch in Exploria Stadium. That will be a pair of matches that you want to watch. I can just tell you that right now. Okay, so that's the news for U.S. soccer. Let's finally switch to talking about this weirdly positioned and somehow creatively constructed match between the United States men's national team and Trinidad and Tobago on Sunday, January 31st at 7 p.m.-ish on Fox Sports 1. Now, this is the January camp, and some people may call this Camp Cupcake. That kind of is a derogatory term, but the point is, this January camp is normally a very heavily domestic-based roster, and you usually see a squad that is nowhere close to the A squad that the U.S. men's national team would put out. And oftentimes, the opponent is at a similar level of pecking order in their depth chart. And Trinidad and Tobago will be no exception. The U.S. and Trinidad are missing some of their star players who play in Europe, but I don't think that means that this game won't have a lot of great individual storylines. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me looking at this game. There are a lot of individuals looking to stake a claim, sorry to use U.S. Soccer's kind of marketing pitch for the men's national team this year, but trying to stake a claim in the full senior national team squad. Both managers of the U.S. national team and Trinidad and Tobago national team have opted for a very youth-heavy roster for their respective squads. And I think that's a positive here. Now, U.S. is pretty much, actually I think the U.S. is all MLS. Trinidad has a lot of players from their Trinidad TT Pro League. They have a couple from MLS and several from USL, as well as some other leagues sprinkled in. So most of these players are from this hemisphere and really from leagues that right now are just not competing. We'll talk a little bit about Trinidad and Tobago in a second, but just wanted to set that scene for the match. It's not in a FIFA window, meaning that clubs don't have to release their players, so you're stuck using players in leagues that are not competing. And around here, that means MLS, USL, the Canada Premier League, and some other leagues in this region are also not competing. But that's why you're going to see two kind of C or B- squads. But the positive is you will definitely see a lot of young talent taking the field in Orlando on Sunday. So speaking of Trinidad, they are currently ranked 103rd in the world. Now, I gotta be honest, they have dropped off significantly in the past 6 years. They were as high as 49 back in 2015. And for one reason or another, the players that they had playing for them when they were at that high of a level have just, they get old. You have to transition out. And the players who were playing for them outside of apparently that one win against us in 2017 have not been up to international quality, comparatively. The new manager, who was hired at the end of 2019 and hasn't been able to even manage the team in a match yet, his name is Terry Fenwick. Now, he is an Englishman. He has 20 caps for the England national team and a long career with non-relevant London-based clubs like Tottenham and Crystal Palace. But he replaced Dennis Lawrence back in 2019 and was set to revitalize the Trinidadian men's national team heading into 2020. But obviously, the coronavirus pandemic halted any plans that any soccer team had of doing anything normally that year. And on top of that, the Trinidad TT Pro League kind of shut down after the coronavirus. They haven't played them. They still have not even restarted their league yet. It's just dormant right now, which is concerning on a whole nother side of things, but not really relevant to this game. So for almost 12 months, these players who are, domestically based in Trinidad haven't been playing competitive matches. They may have been training here and there, but they haven't been able to do so at full capacity. So for Coach Terry Fenwick, in his first match ever leading the Trinidadian national team, the home nation of his wife, by the way, this is a big challenge, is to just get his team ready to play. And I don't think it's fair, I'll say this right up top, I don't think it's fair to judge the trajectory of Trinidad or Fenwick or any individual player necessarily based on this match alone. But I do think it's fair to look at the potential they might have and a general idea of how they want to play. Fenwick said that he wanted to play the United States because they are, quote, possibly the biggest brand in CONCACAF. They said that they, quote, sidestepped Anguilla for this match. So they had a match scheduled for Anguilla and scrapped that to play the United States. Obviously, the United States was reportedly going to play Serbia in this on this date, but for some reason or another that just didn't work out. It was never actually announced, but like both sides, reporters from both sides basically said it was going to happen. Serbia was planning to play Dominican Republic anyway. It made sense. But I think that Trinidad will be a good opponent for the United States because both teams will have a very, very similar goal, playing young talent and preparing for a long year of World Cup qualifying. And that brings me to my second point about Trinidad, that they're about to take on a pre-qualifying campaign, or the first round of qualifying. CONCACAF has termed it as that. Really, this is the group play-in round for the final round robin of CONCACAF qualifying for the World Cup. So they start in March against Guyana, and they're going to play their group of teams. The winner of that group will then play a playoff against the winner of Group A, their Group F. And that winner will actually play the United States on the first match day of the final round of qualifying. So we may see Trinidad and Tobago sooner than we thought. Same as El Salvador, because El Salvador is in Group A. But I digress. Anyway, so like I said, this should be a very young team. In fact, Coach Fenwick has stated that he's going to be focusing on the young players. All of these players that he selected actually have played and come through the Trinidad National Youth System. So they've played for Trinidad at a youth tournament in some capacity. So that's actually a positive, I think, is that you have a lot of young guys who have played together in some capacity or worked together under the Trinidad FA. I think that's a smart move by Fenwick. Now, even though there's no Pro League or Super League football, they still can train together and try to hopefully get up to match speed. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think for them, the most important thing right now is just training together and understanding the new manager's vision, philosophy, and plan for how they're going to qualify for at least get through this first round of this first group round in CONCACAF qualifying. According to Fenwick, this is the perfect restart to football on the islands, this match against the United States. And I think Trinidad is hoping that this match can kickstart the leagues again and bring back competitive football in Trinidad and Tobago. So this is their first international friendly in 13 months. They have a lot to prepare for this year and a short amount of time to do it. So we will see how this very young Trinidad team plays. Let's go over their roster real quick. It's a very young roster, as we've been saying. The average age is 24 and a half years. They have an average of fewer than 7 caps total. So, like, the most experienced player on this roster is a goalkeeper with 80 caps, and then you have a couple in the teens. Most of them just have a handful of caps, if any. So it's a very inexperienced squad as well as young. So here's the roster. In goal for Trinidad, it'll be Adrian Fonset and Marvin Phillip. Phillip is the old head. He's 36 with 80 caps, but Fonset, 32 with 15 caps. So both of those very old. That's like the opposite of what is the trend for the rest of the roster. Defenders, we have a lot of actually really... I think this defender group is going to be shaky, but it's nice to see that there's a lot of them playing in the United States. So you have Nabil Hackshaw at ND11, Noah Powder for Real Salt Lake now, formerly with Red Bull Academy, Leland Archer with Charleston Battery, Michael DeShields, a DC United draft pick this year from Wake Forest, Josiah Trimingham from Forward Madison, Alvin Jones, an unattached player, but someone who has last played with Real Salt Lake and has spent a lot of time with Oklahoma City and the USL. Federico Pena, who plays in the Canadian Premier League. Justin Garcia for Defence Force in Trinidad. Jesse Williams, one of 2 Coleraine FC players from Northern Ireland. And Jamal Jack, who plays in the Guatemala League. So like I said, those defenders, probably a little shaky. They don't have a whole lot of caps among them. Nabil Hackshaw is center back. He's 24, got 14 caps. And then Jones, a right back with 25 caps. I would expect those 2 to start. I don't know who will start alongside them, but just having that experience would probably be good for Fenwick. It wouldn't surprise me if you see Leland Archer starting. He's a center back as well. That would probably be my guess. In the midfield, you have Dre Fortune, who is with North Carolina FC, been all over NASL and USL, 94 appearances between Rochester and North Carolina. He had 6 goals in last season, so that might actually be a pretty good player to look out for, Dre Fortune. Then you have Dwayne Maquette, who plays for Memphis 901. Jonathan Jimenez, an unattached player. Matthew Wu Ling at AC Port of Spain in Trinidad. The player that I am most excited for, Michel Poon Angeron, playing at Club Atlético Banfield down in Argentina. Only 19. He's a deep-lying playmaker, regista-type player, but he plays for the reserve team at Banfield. So I'm really curious to see him play an actual game and evaluate him and see what his actual potential and upside is. After that, we have Johnny Fortune, or Jay Fortune, who you may know here from Atlanta United Academy and Atlanta United 2. And in fact, last year he made 11 appearances and scored a goal for Atlanta United 2. So he's definitely, even at 18, an up-and-coming player that Trinidad will want to have. Hashim Arcia at Defense Force FC, the old head of the midfield group. He's 32, he's got 13 caps. Not sure if he'll start or not. I think that this midfield group lends itself to cutting some teeth of younger players, and there's a lot of young midfield talent here for Fenwick to choose from. I don't know if Hashim Arcia will get a look this game. And then on the forward line, some attacking talent, but really a step down from what has been for Trinidad in the past. You have Jabari Mitchell, who plays for Police FC in Trinidad. Gary Griffith III, the other Coleraine product, who's just 18. Ryan Telfer, who plays at York United. He's been playing in Canada for a couple of spells. A winger, Canadian dual national. He's got 6 caps and 3 goals at 26 years of age. I do expect him to start, and I do expect him to be a threat for Trinidad against the United States. I do think that Ryan Telfer will be someone who we will have to account for. Brent Sam playing for Defense Force FC, and then Sean Bonval playing for Central FC, both in the Trinidad Professional League. So that's the roster. There were 24 guys selected, 2 goalkeepers, 10 defenders, 7 midfielders, and 5 forwards. I'm really curious to see how Fenwick chooses his midfield. I don't know what exactly formation will play. I mean, it's so hard to judge what this Trinidad team wants to do because they haven't trained together for a match in 13 months. They haven't even played professional matches, many of them, in Trinidad for almost 11, 12 months now. And Fenwick hasn't really been able to coach these guys up. So I'm not sure what his formation is going to be. I think that's something he'll find out in this camp. But I'm really excited to see what he chooses for his midfield pairings, because I think that there is a lot of young attacking midfield talent here. Okay, so that is Trinidad. I do think that this is going to be... So Trinidad and the United States have a weird, overlapping history. I know a lot's going to probably be made about 2017, and we'll talk about this later in a listener question, but I think that it's just a cool pattern to recognize when these two teams face. If you don't know the history, back in 1989, the United States had to go to Trinidad looking for a win on the final match day of World Cup qualifying to qualify for the 1990 World Cup in Italy. That was very important for U.S. Soccer Federation because they wanted to make sure that they qualified for the World Cup ahead of the 94 World Cup that they were hosting. And a late Paul Caligari goal won the game for the United States in Trinidad and actually kicked out Trinidad from World Cup contention at the same time. So flash forward to 2017, an already eliminated Trinidad team beats the United States 2-1 to kick the U.S. out of World Cup contention. And there's some other kind of layers into this, but it's just a really cool storyline that needs to be recognized when these two teams play. But overall, the United States is 19-4-4 against Trinidad. Trinidad has never lost to the United States in Trinidad, but the United States has a fairly formidable record against Trinidad on home soil, and most of those include some sort of CONCACAF competition, be it Gold Cup or qualifying at home. In fact, I don't think these teams have met for a friendly in 20 years. It's kind of interesting there. The last match we played against Trinidad was a 6-0 win in the 2019 Gold Cup. And like I said, these two teams could face each other opening match day in September of 2022 World Cup qualifying for the United States anyway. So that's a little bit of a preview of Trinidad. Now let's take a look at the United States. Today's show is sponsored by Goodfellas Technology. Goodfellas will build you a digital storefront and custom WordPress theme to help you meet your customers where they shop, online. Goodfellas will do the work to get your site set up and make it easy for you to manage your new e-commerce site. They'll even update your site as your business grows. Check out goodfellastech.com to build your e-commerce site today. So at the beginning of January, Greg Berhalter, who is in charge of the program, I guess, as a whole, called in 2 camps for January. And he was very deliberate about delineating their 2 rosters. The first was the senior national team roster, which had 12 players on it. And the second was a U23 roster to kind of get these players in and train them up for Olympic qualifying in March. That team, coached by Jason Kreis, trained alongside of Berhalter's senior team. And it looked like Berhalter and Kreis were kind of, Kreis was coaching his guys, but really Berhalter was running everything. So you took the 26-man roster for the under-23 squad. You took the 12-man roster from the senior national team, accounted for some players who had to leave, and you have a 25-man roster for this match day. We'll go through that, but before we get to that, I do want to point out that, again, this is not a full-strength national team for the United States or for Berhalter's first choices. That's not how this is going to work. But I do think that there are some players here who could work themselves into first choice positions. So with that said, let's look at this roster. We have 3 goalkeepers. Matt Turner, the senior national team guy, I think he'll start. The New England Revolution man has had a couple of great seasons in MLS. But then you have JT Marcinkowski, who, for my bet, is probably the best U23 keeper we have. He's the starter for San Jose, and he's been a part of most of the U23 matches his entire spell. And then you have Matt Freese from the backup at Philadelphia. So those are your goalkeepers. For the defenders, there's only 2 senior national team players, and their names shouldn't surprise you. You have Aaron Long from New York Red Bulls, and Walker Zimmerman from Nashville SC. Walker Zimmerman, a Brookwood High School product, I might add. Anyway, those 2 guys have kind of established themselves as 2 things, 2 roles. One, they've established themselves as the 2 best center backs playing for the U.S. and MLS. So I think those are important roles to fill. Pretty much the 2 best U.S. defenders in MLS, but they also fill the role as kind of like the threshold or the benchmark for what it means to be a U.S. men's national team center back. And what I mean is there's a lot of promising young center backs coming up. We saw Mark McKenzie in last month in December's camp, and he did start over Zimmerman. But I think the point I'm making here is they're the 2 that you have to beat out right now to get to that center back depth chart, right? We all understand that John Brooks, who's at Wolfsburg in Germany, is number 1. But Long and Zimmerman have been playing a lot. I mean, Long has, to his credit, 18 caps, and Zimmerman with 13. That doesn't sound like a lot, but they haven't been playing with the national team, but for 3 years now. So I think that they are good to have here because after that you have 2 center backs who are up and coming, and that's Mauricio Pineda from Chicago and Miles Robinson from Atlanta United. Now, they're both U23 eligible, and I expect them both to be considered for a trip to Mexico for CONCACAF qualifying. And as your outside backs, you have Julian Araujo from LA Galaxy, George Bello from Atlanta United, Kyle Duncan from New York Red Bulls, Aaron Herrera from Real Salt Lake, Sam Vines from Colorado. So all of those guys actually are really kind of in that same boat. Araujo and Vines both started and played pretty well, I'll say, in the December friendly against El Salvador, although judging a defender against an El Salvadorian team that really did nothing is hard to do. But they both contributed well offensively and held their own for the most part in defense. And they've been pretty consistent players for their respective MLS clubs. And then you have George Bello and Kyle Duncan as well, who are, and Aaron Herrera, who may not have been getting the looks that others have been. Kyle Duncan did play in December, but that was his first cap. Bello and Herrera don't have caps. Herrera has been a part of youth national teams. Bello has been a part of youth national teams. But all of those guys, all these outside backs, are consistent starters for their MLS clubs. And they're all under 23. And I think that's a very, very important evolution of outside backs for this men's national team, especially at left back, where you have Bello and you have Vines, who are both fine. They're both perfectly acceptable outside backs, left backs in MLS. Bello's a little bit young. He still has some growing to do. Vines could definitely improve his game, but they're both very individually solid. And so this is a good sign for the United States men's national team that all of these guys are U23 eligible. We don't know which clubs will release who, so having them in there will be a positive. Midfielders. The senior midfielders are Kellen Acosta from Colorado, Sebastian Lletget from LA, Christian Roldan from Seattle. And your U23s are Benji Michel and Andreas Perea from Orlando City, Tanner Tessman from Dallas, and Jackson Ewell from San Jose. Now, Ewell has been playing on senior national teams. He's got 8 caps for the U.S. already. I think he'll probably start alongside of, maybe Christian Roldan and Lletget, or maybe Acosta and Lletget. Weirdly enough, Kellen Acosta is the guy who has the most caps in this midfield group. He has 24. But yeah, I think it'll be an interesting decision for Berhalter how he wants to go with his midfield, because he could pick all young guys playing, maybe Perea, Tessman, and even Michel. That's a possibility. Or he could go straight up experience, playing guys like Ewell, Roldan, Lletget, Acosta, a combination of 3 of those in the midfield. Now, up top, I am really curious to see how Berhalter manages the minutes here. You have Josie Altidore, a very well-established U.S. men's national team player. He's got 115 caps, 42 goals. He's 31 years old, playing at Toronto, but he's been injured on and off for the past couple seasons. Paul Arriola from D.C. and Chris Mueller from Orlando City are the senior forwards, and then the U23s are Daryl Dike, Jesus Ferreira, and Jonathan Lewis. Where I'm curious is how Berhalter manages the Altidore and DK minutes, but I really want to see DK get the bulk of the minutes, mainly because I wanted to see him in December. We didn't because he got hurt, and I think it's worth seeing if he can give us an answer at that striker position. Josie Altidore was a very determined and dynamic player in the 2018 World Cup cycle. He may not have scored a whole lot, but he was very influential into the build-up of play, and I think he can do that again. But I also really want to see if Daryl Dike can do that in the Berhalter system as well. So let's talk about my starting 11. Now, full disclosure, I recorded this late Friday night. Greg Berhalter came out in his media availability on Saturday and revealed that certain players would be playing and certain players would not be playing. So here's an updated 11 from what I've heard recorded earlier. So we do know that Matt Turner will start in goal. I had that predicted, and I think that makes the most logical sense for Berhalter. I think if you're Greg Berhalter, you see a goalkeeping pool that, while there's a lot of potential players at the senior level who can be in a roster and play goalkeeper, I think he's looking at the future and seeing that you have Matt Turner as a very likely contributor, maybe over the summer for one of the tournaments, or just being, in that backup role, especially you have Zach Steffen and Ethan Horvath who are in Europe. It'll be good to have Matt Turner as the established domestic keeper. So good choice there by Berhalter to start Matt Turner in goal. Learned that Julian Araujo will not be playing in this camp, so I had him starting at right back. I think now we will see Kyle Duncan, who played against El Salvador in December. We also learned that Miles Robinson will start alongside Aaron Long as the center back pairing. Now, as an Atlanta United fan, that makes me very happy. I think Miles Robinson has earned that. I'm a little shocked. I personally would have had Walker Zimmerman starting next to Aaron Long, but I'm glad, as we mentioned earlier, that we've seen Mark McKenzie and now Miles Robinson earn starts next to Aaron Long in these friendlies. It shows that there are guys who are ready to step up into that center back pool and possibly, be a consistent starter. So right now in the back line, my back line would look like Kyle Duncan on the right, Miles Robinson, Aaron Long at the middle, and Sam Vines out left. In the midfield, probably going to be a more experienced midfield, I would imagine. You're going to have, in my opinion, I would start Jackson Ewell, Kellen Acosta, and Sebastian Lletget. However, I wouldn't be surprised if Tanner Tessman starts at either the 6 or the 8. Also would not be surprised if Andres Perea starts in favor of Ewell, just because he went through that process of getting the one-time switch from Colombia to the United States. Reward him for that with a start in, not a meaningless friendly, but a low-stakes competition. Now, up top, we did learn that Josie Altidore will not be playing in this friendly. Apparently, he's been getting some looks from overseas, or at least from clubs not Toronto FC. So with that said, it's got to be Daryl Dike starting. I think if you're looking for someone who could possibly replace Dike at that striker position, it could be Jesus Ferreira. But for me, Daryl Dike needs to start. And alongside of him, I would put Areola on the right and Chris Mueller on the left. I think actually that starting three, that front three you have there, could be the front three that you see at the Gold Cup in July. I really think that the Gold Cup roster will probably be very heavy MLS players. And it wouldn't surprise me to see those three, Areola, DK, and Mueller, as your starting front line in the Gold Cup. And I think that planting that seed right now is really a good idea. And I don't think, if you're a U.S. national team fan and you look at those front three, that's pretty good. So again, you'll have, in my opinion, what I would do, based on what Berhalter has also said, you'll have Turner in goal, Duncan, Robinson, Long, Vines along the back line, Ewell, Acosta, Lletget in the midfield, Areola, DK, and Mueller from right to left on the front line. Tweet at me at SoccerForUsPod if you have any takes on that. I will probably put out that lineup graphic when I release the podcast, and that way you can see visually what it is. But tweet at me at SoccerForUsPod and give your thoughts on that starting 11 or what you think your starting 11 would be. Now, I'd like to take some of your questions. So like I said, you can follow us at SoccerForUsPod, tweet us there. I guess I keep saying us. It's me. I'm sorry. It's me. I'll break it eventually. I'm so used to saying us from my other podcasts. But you can tweet me there, SoccerForUsPod, and give me your thoughts on the team that is selected for Sunday. Give me your thoughts on the game. Whatever thoughts you have about the U.S. men's or women's national team, put them there on Twitter at SoccerForUsPod. This Twitter question comes from Logando at Logando_5. And he asks, what will the lineup say about the team moving forward? Well, I think it depends on what the lineup is, because if it's a senior stocked lineup, there's 10 of them out there, 10 of them in the roster. If you put, 8 to 10 of them out there, then I think it says that Berhalter is stocking the pond for the, competitions we have coming up this summer. You have CONCACAF Nations League finals in June, you have Gold Cup in July, and then you have World Cup qualifying starting in September. You want to have as many people as possible to play in these tournaments. Kind of protect yourself. This is insurance, right? These are risk assessments. This is an insurance policy on if one of your big name guys gets hurt, you have a guy ready to come in who may not be at that quality but is at that level of understanding of the system. So I think that's what a senior-laden roster could be. If it's a youth-laden roster, then I think it really underscores the importance of qualifying for the Olympics. We haven't done it since 2008. We need to do it. It has definitely been a problem, and we saw it bear out in the 2018 cycle, where after 2 failed Olympic qualifications runs, you saw that we had players who should have been coming up in those age groups that weren't. Call it the lost generation, call it whatever you want, but qualifying for the Olympics, at least just, it's good for talent identification, it's good for team chemistry, it's good for program building. And I think if you see a youth-heavy roster, that means that Berhalter and Kreis are really focused on qualifying for Tokyo this summer. I don't think the formation will do anything there for you, Logando. I think we're going to see, a 4-1-2-3-ish formation. We'll probably attack in a 3-back and, maybe like 5 midfielders. It'll be interesting to see, but I don't think that'll be anything different. I'm pretty sure that Berhalter will stick with what he's been using. Next question comes from Andrew Buccellato on Twitter at A2Booch. Do you think there's any lingering issues from that fateful night in World Cup qualifying in 2017? Yeah, with the fans. There's a lot of positivity among the fan base and on USMNT Twitter, trademark, USMNT Twitter. But, that hope is not unbridled. You can kind of feel a tinge of anxiety. And it does stem from that result from 2017. We want to be super hype about these kids, but we also don't want to get our hopes up because they've been dashed before. And you know what? I mean, we're kind of right to have that feeling, but these players are so different. There's only 4 guys from that roster in 2017 who have been playing really at all. And 3 of them, yes, they're in this camp, but it's Areola, it's Acosta, and it's Altidore. Now, is Acosta a part of the U.S. national team going forward? I don't know. I'd love for Altidore to continue to be a part of it, but can he handle it? Can his body physically manage it and stay healthy? And then Areola is a workhorse. I don't think he was, I don't think any of these guys were the problem in 2017. And the 4th guy was Pulisic, so no, I don't think that's hanging over. What I do think, though, from a program standpoint, I think there's just pressure to qualify for a World Cup, and I think it's a new realization that qualification is not guaranteed, and you're going to have to work for it. It's hard, and you're going to have to prepare for a difficult time in CONCACAF World Cup qualifying, especially in this octagonal or the octagon or whatever you want to call it, where you're going to have 14 games. That's a slog, and some of those windows you're going to have 3 games in a row. So I think for the program as a whole is just preparing for what is going to be difficult qualification, because we now realize that it's not a guarantee. Well, okay, thanks for the questions. I really do appreciate it. It makes it a lot easier for me. If you have any further thoughts or questions, tweet at me at Soccer4UsPod. We'll be doing a show probably coming out Tuesday to recap the USA versus Trinidad game. And then we'll be back in February for the She Believes Cup as the United States takes on Canada, Brazil, and Argentina. So watch the U.S. on Sunday against Trinidad and Tobago, 7 o'clock p.m.-ish on Fox Sports 1, live from Exploria Stadium in Orlando, which I will say is a beautiful, beautiful soccer stadium. And I'm very glad we have that type of stadium to go watch and play U.S. national team games in. Won't comment on the team that plays there yet. Tweet at me if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions, whatever you have about that game, at Soccer4UsPod. And again, subscribe to Soccer Down Here. However you're listening right now, if this is your mode of listening to podcasts, give us a subscribe. You'll get the daily Soccer Down Here show. You'll get Soccer Over There. You'll get this show. And then you'll get the run-up for Atlanta United preview. Again, thank you so much for being here for this first episode of Soccer for Us. I'm Bart Keeler. I'm out.